Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share a one-shot with you that I recorded in celebration of having 2,000 subscribers on this channel. I'm really thankful for each and every one of you that subscribes to the channel, that likes or comments on videos. It means so much to me, you really have no idea. Today we are going to read a Drarry one-shot by OwlsWithFins and the title is Stolen Sweaters. Summary. Oh, sorry, is my gaze showing? In which Harry is a cocky bastard and Draco should really pay more attention to where he leaves his clothes. It started innocently enough. Harry was labouring away at his defence against the dark arts work in the library when he spotted it. More accurately, he was ignoring his apprenticeship work when he discovered the perfect distraction. A grey sweater neatly draped over the back of an unoccupied chair. It seemed its owner had left it behind in their haste to get to class. Harry knew, of course, that the right thing to do would be to find out who it belonged to and return it. And if the mission meant taking a break from his assignments, he was beyond okay with that. After keeping a careful lookout for several minutes to see if anyone came to retrieve it, Harry walked over and picked it up. It seemed familiar, though he couldn't think why. Generally, he didn't notice clothing since, as Hermione was wont to point out, he was more oblivious than a piece of plywood. But he knew he'd seen this particular sweater before. It was thin, too large for any of the first through third years, and if Harry had seen it, it was likely from someone in 7th or 8th. After checking inside the collar and seeing no name written on the tag, he pulled it close to inhale the scent. Green apples, broom polish, and an expensive cologne Harry would recognize anywhere. The realization hit him instantly. He shoved the sweater in his bag, packed up his books, and made a hasty exit. Harry's heart was beating loudly in his ears all the way to the 8th year dorms. He felt conspicuous, like there was a dancing arrow over his head spelling, "Thief, thief, thief," in neon. "Hiya, Harry," Seamus greeted as he made his way through the common room. Harry nodded briskly and kept walking. He couldn't risk accidentally meeting Malfoy's eyes, because he was sure one look would give him away. The moment his door shut behind him, he exhaled and took a moment to collect himself. The dorm was empty, since he only shared it with Ron, who was on a date with Hermione at the Three Broomsticks. As 8th year's returnees, they were granted more privileges than other students. They could go to Hogsmeade whenever they chose, and they weren't restricted to the Hogwarts dress code, which meant Harry practically lived in muggle jeans and band t-shirts he found in Sirius' room at Grimmauld Place. They also had the opportunity to work as apprentices with certain professors. Malfoy worked with Slughorn, Hermione worked with McGonagall, and Neville worked with Professor Sprout. Harry quite enjoyed his work with the new defense teacher, but he still found himself wishing Remus was the one teaching him instead. He did a lot of wishing for lost faces these days. Pulling the sweater out of his bag, Harry drew it close and breathed in that intoxicating scent. His eyes fell shut, and his thoughts visited cool grey eyes, soft blonde hair, and the sharp angles of Malfoy's Quidditch-toned limbs. Harry had seen a lot of him since returning to Hogwarts, as the 8th years were in most of the same classes. They'd even come to a sort of truce, though Harry wouldn't go so far as call them friends. During that time, Harry had come to terms with the fact that he was very, very gay and hopelessly crushing on said Slytherin. He let his head fall back against the door. As Harry considered his options, a sly smile slid across his face. It was a moment of weakness that led to the theft of the sweater instead of its return, but it was Slytherin cunning that led to what happened next. The next morning, Harry strutted into potions with an easy smirk on his face. He wordlessly took a seat next to Malfoy and leaned back, resting his hand on the back of his neck. Malfoy was carefully copying notes from the board and didn't seem to notice Harry's arrival, but a Gryffindor took a moment to study the blonde. He was wearing a deep green sweater today, and he sat as posh as ever in his chair. He'd taken to wearing his hair loose lately rather than slicking it back, and the white tufts looked deliciously soft. When Malfoy continued to copy his notes, Harry got impatient. Ahem. What is it, Potter? He didn't look up, so Harry cleared his throat once more. For Merlin's sake, Potter, spit it out. Can't you see I'm trying to do the assignment? Harry rolled his eyes. As if Malfoy even needed to copy these notes down. He could do this potion with his hands tied behind his back. Notice anything? Harry asked. Malfoy finally looked at him. The coldness in his eyes could have turned a muggle to stone. You're taking up an ungodly amount of space given the size of this table. Harry snorted. Try again. Malfoy gave a self-pitying sigh, but looked again. You're wearing a woman's sweater. Harry cracked up then, which only made Malfoy scowl more. I suppose you know. Malfoy narrowed his eyes. What's that supposed to mean, Potter? Harry wiggled his brows and gestured at himself. Malfoy scoffed. I don't have time for this. Go bother the weasel. Harry grinned, but dutifully began copying his notes without another word. Malfoy was on the edge for the first few minutes, as if he expected another comment or strange game, but soon he too fell into his work. When it was time to start the potion, Malfoy removed his sweater and set it on the back of his chair. Would you mind grabbing the ingredients? Harry asked pleasantly. Malfoy stood and walked into the supply closet. Harry, meanwhile, looked around to make sure no one was watching before slipping the green sweater into his bag. He then prepared the cauldrons as if nothing had happened and waited to see if Malfoy noticed. When Malfoy returned, his arms were full and his mind seemed to be 5 steps ahead, and definitely not on the missing sweater. Harry grinned wider. What is so amusing, Potter? Malfoy asked when Harry didn't stop. Harry only shook his head. Nothing. Let's get this potion done, yeah? Malfoy studied him in suspicion. You'd better not try anything. I'm up to my ears in apprenticeship work, and I can't handle getting on Slughorn's bad side. Harry smirked. I assure you, messing with the potion isn't part of the plan. Malfoy looked relieved. Thank Merlin. If you could start cutting up the... Wait, what plan? Harry only shook his head and got to work. He could see Malfoy opening and closing his mouth in his periphery, but he didn't acknowledge it. Eventually, Malfoy got to work as well, but his jaw was clenched and his fingers stiff, as if he was ready for whatever Harry threw at him. Little did he know, Harry wasn't interested in throwing things as much as he was in stealing them. And step 2 of the plan was already complete. Draco's nerves were in tatters by the time he left potions. He kept waiting for Potter to do whatever he was planning to do, but he never did. Pansy and Blaise were giggling about something or other, but Draco couldn't get that infernal grin out of his mind. Potter hated potions, and he was bollocks at it besides. There was no reason for him to be that bloody happy unless he was plotting something. But if he was plotting something, why didn't anything go wrong? Draco was still wondering what the answer was during Ancient Runes, and then Transfigurations, and then Charms. He felt like he was losing his mind. As he washed his hands in the bathroom before dinner, he noticed he wasn't wearing his sweater. Merlin, I really am losing my mind. Where did I leave it last? He decided to retrace his steps, which meant the first possibility was the Great Hall. Arriving at the southern table, he realized he would look like a barbarian or an idiot if he started crawling under the tables or checking all the benches while people were sitting on them. So instead, he announced, My sweater is missing. Has anyone seen it? The first years nervously shook their head, too intimidated to be of any help. Some of the older students looked around briefly before shrugging and muttering their nose. I'd be happy to help. What does it look like? Astoria asked. She was always kissing up to him because her parents thought they'd make a good match. Draco could see through it like glass, but it generally served him to have an eager helper, so he hadn't told it to piss off yet. It's a green turtleneck. I'm off to check potions. Let me know if you find it. She nodded enthusiastically, and Pansy and Blaze rolled their eyes. Draco shrugged in reply before taking off for his next stop. When he stepped into the potions room, he racked his brain to remember if he had been wearing it during class. Yes, he was quite sure he had in the beginning, but then he had taken it off before getting the supplies. It must be in his chair, then. There wasn't a class there, so he didn't have to make a scene, and he whistled a soft tune, pleased to have solved the puzzle. His hopes fell, however, when he reached his seat. The sweater wasn't there. Did someone pick it up and give it to Stockholm, perhaps? Did Draco take it with him and leave it somewhere else? Upon careful review of his memory, he realized the sweater wasn't there when he came back with supplies. Which meant Potter must have taken it. Which was why he looked so darn pleased with himself. Draco hissed and stormed off into the castle. Of course it was Potter. Why hadn't he thought of it earlier? Draco thought Potter must have gone a bit loony if he thought this was a prank, but maybe there was more to it that Draco hadn't discovered yet. Either way, Draco was sure the Weasley twins would be disappointed in the Golden Boy if they witnessed this particular tomfoolery. As Draco made his way to the Great Hall, he remembered another part of potions class. "Notice anything?" Harry asked. "You're wearing a woman's sweater. I suppose you'd known." Fuck! He'd taken Draco's other sweater as well. He was wearing it. And he'd gotten Draco to accidentally insult his own fashion sense. Salazar Draco was going to kill him. He stormed into the Great Hall and made his way towards Potter. Distantly he heard people snickering, but the sound didn't quite register. When he finally reached the thief, he crossed his arms. "Potter, outside, now." Potter grinned, eyes matching the new sweater which he was wearing now instead of the grey one. "Sure, Malfoy." Draco walked out and Potter followed. People whispered as they made their exit, but there was something odd about the tone. Usually when he and Potter fought, people placed bets and said their prayers, while today it was the sound of rumours and suppressed giggles. Draco didn't have time to figure out what that meant. Once outside, he whirled on Potter. "You stole my sweater." Potter held up 2 fingers. Draco exhaled as evenly as possible. "You stole 2 of my sweaters." Potter was grinning again. "What are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to tear it off you, you stupid prat." Potter raised his brows. "How forward of you, Malfoy. Most blokes would ask a guy on a date first." The Gryffindor's lips twisted into another one of those smiles, and Draco thought he might throttle him. Instead, he pinned him against the wall. "I'm not asking you on a goddamn date, Potter. I'm asking for my fucking sweater back." Potter winced at the volume. "Have fun telling that to the rest of the students." Draco stared blankly. "What are you talking about?" "Didn't you hear them whispering?" He seemed genuinely surprised. They weren't quiet about it at all. They were making bets on whether or not we're shagging and gossiping about us being in a secret relationship. "What? What did you tell them, Potter? Did you tell them we're boyfriends or something?" "Oh, I didn't say anything." "Did you do something then?" Potter looked nervously at the ground. No, you said something." Draco looked even more flabbergasted. "What are you talking about?" Potter shuffled his feet. "You told everyone this is your sweater and I'm wearing it, so they just, connected the dots." Draco released him like he'd been burned. "What the fuck, Potter? Why didn't you tell them off? How the fuck are you planning to convince them that we're actually enemies? You know how these people are." When there was no response, Draco started pulling the sweater off of Potter, only to realize, once it was off, that he wasn't wearing anything underneath. Draco's face went pink. Potter awkwardly ran a hand through his hair. "Funny enough, I don't think this is going to convince them we're not fucking." Draco blushed even harder at his choice of language. "Sorry, Potter, but I didn't expect you to be defiling my sweater by wearing it against your bare chest." "Oh, I didn't expect you to disrobe me in the middle of the corridor, but look where we are now." "Why are you not more upset by this?" Draco hissed. Potter seemed insistent on being unhelpful, so Draco knew it was up to him to make things right. He started unbuttoning his shirt. "Malfoy, what are you doing?" "Giving you my shirt so you don't walk in there half naked." Harry nodded dazedly. "Right. What thinking?" His eyes followed Draco's finger as they undid each button one by one. "Except the reason they think we're together in the first place is because I was wearing your clothes. So us switching clothes isn't going to help our case. Do you have a better idea, Potter?" Breathlessly, he managed, "No, sorry. Keep going." Draco looked up at the tone of his voice. "Salazar Potter, you're flushed. Are you trying to make it look like we just shagged?" Potter threw his hands in the air. "Oh, sorry, is my gaze showing?" Draco froze on the last button. Fuck, did he just imply that he was flushing because of me? Potter bit his lip, realizing what he'd just said. Draco met his eyes. There was a moment of tension so heavy it squeezed at Draco's lungs. "I'll try harder," Potter said quietly. "I don't want to ruin your reputation or whatever of a stupid prank." Draco nervously broke eye contact and pulled his shirt off. Without a word, he handed it to Potter, who took it and began to put it on. When he got to the buttons, Draco brushed those 10 hands aside and did them up himself. He heard Potter's breath catch. His own breath was shaky as he reached the last button, and his hands weren't much better. He straightened the collar and met Potter's gaze once more. Potter was a little shorter than him, but not by much, so he could feel his breath on his neck. Electricity sparked between them, threatening to close the gap and press them together. Draco hadn't realized how much he'd wanted just that until the electricity won over, and he found himself kissing the Gryffindor. Potter's lips were chapped, and when Draco didn't pull away, they began to move with a hot, insistent pressure against Draco's. Draco let his hand slip down from Potter's collar onto his torso. He regretted doing up the buttons already, but he'd needed that time to convince himself to kiss Potter at all, and the white button-down was then enough. Potter looped his fingers through Draco's belt loops and pulled him up against him before wrapping his hands around Draco's back. Draco felt each touch like fire on his skin, and he knew there was no chance of looking innocent now. His pale skin would be flushed to match Potter's, and his lips would likely be bruised. He must have been somewhat lightheaded because that thought didn't even bother him. He finally broke away for air. Potter's eyes were bright, and his lips were parted in a way that made Draco want to kiss him again. "Was that part of the plan?" Potter asked. "Because you look thoroughly snogged, and I highly doubt you're going to convince anyone of anything." Draco raised his eyebrows. "Oh, sorry. Is my gaze showing?" Potter shoved him with a smile, handing Draco his sweater. "You know," Draco said as he pulled it over his head, "we could always just not go back. Then we don't have to prove anything." Potter narrowed his eyes. "You know they'll assume anyway, right?" Draco smirked. "Let them. It's not like they're too far off the track." Then he glared. "This was your plan all along, wasn't it?" When Potter didn't respond, Draco continued.
If it hadn't been absolutely bonkers, I would have seen it from the start. It worked, didn't it?
Potter looked hopefully at him from beneath his fringe. Draco considered objecting to that, but he figured maybe it was alright for Potter to best him sometimes if it led to snogging.
Since we're not going back to the Great Hall, Potter continued, what are we doing?
Draco pretended to be in deep thought.
Well, I've recently made a new discovery, but before I'm convinced, I have to do a few more trials. And what might that discovery be? That you look devastatingly handsome in my clothes. Care to come to my dormitory and see if the results are consistent?
Potter hid a smile, tapping his chin.
I could be convinced to try on your clothes, but only if you're willing to take them off of me.
Draco smirked.
I think I could be persuaded.
Harry did smile now, gesturing down the hall.
Lead the way.
The end. So, this was our 2000 subscriber special one-shot, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Again, thank you all so much for listening, for commenting, for liking the videos. It really means a lot to me. Go to the archive and give some love to the original author. She is amazing. I love her stories, and she deserves all the credit in the world. Thanks again for listening, and I hope to hear you very soon.